computer. Yes, okay. Okay, it's recording. The Facebook page is connecting now. Okay, I just have to say the title for the webinar. Okay, go live. It should tell us when we're live. I think we're probably live already. The setting up, okay.
I think it's already live.
Okay, awesome. Hey everybody, Letitia here, coming to you this sunny Thursday afternoon, August the 6th from Toronto. And we're here for another edition of my weekly Money Matters webinar series. And today's topic, as you may have seen, is Real Estate Investing 101. Real estate investing is a topic that I think is of interest to many of you. And I know many of you in my network are already active real estate investors, but those of you who are not, we are doing an introductory webinar, and I have the honor of being joined today by one of Canada's foremost authorities on real estate investing, Tahani Aburaneh. Welcome, Tahani.
Thank you, Letitia, for having me.
So I want to just say a few words about Tahani, everyone, in case you haven't heard of this amazing lady. Tahani came from very humble beginnings. She ended up in a refugee camp in her homeland of, was it Syria, Tahani? Jordan, I'm sorry. And you know, many years later found herself in Canada, and again went through some very rough circumstances, an abusive marriage. Eventually she ended up, sorry for, I hope I'm not sharing too much, Tahani, but your story is truly inspiring because you came from very humble beginnings and you were able to turn your life around and are currently one of Canada's again most top real estate investing experts, self-made millionaire and serial entrepreneur, wealth coach, real estate investor, and owner of a brokerage. And you are also the founder of Females in Real Estate. And you are the author of Amazon best-selling book, Real Estate Riches. And you are the recipient of the Ontario Entrepreneurship Premier Award for your contributions to your community. And you literally have so many accomplishments under your belt, Tahani. You're absolutely an inspiring lady. And I know you're particularly passionate about empowering women through real estate investing so that they can achieve wealth and financial independence. Do you have any starting words, Tahani, before we begin our presentation?
First of all, thank you, Letitia, for having me as your guest, and for all the listeners that are going to be listening to this podcast or this Facebook Live, I should say. Yeah, I mean, what I wanted to say to anyone that's listening, that it doesn't matter where you come from or your humble beginning or what you've already experienced, but what matters is what you do right now with all of that. So this is like almost like a turning page, and you have the power of really creating the life that you want. No matter what you think, every and each one of us have the power of creating the life that we want.
Thank you, Tahani. And again, as I shared with you, Tahani, there are a variety of people in my audience. Some of them may be complete newbies to the world of real estate investing. And since this is my first webinar on this subject, I wanted to take, at least part of the webinar to talk about some of the different strategies involved with real estate investing. My own background is that I do have a bit of investing experience. I kind of fell into real estate investing a number of years ago, watching those HGTV flipping shows, which is, how most people find out about real estate investing. And I happen to work with a realtor that specialized in sourcing below market value properties. I was able to get into what became my first flip. And when we talk about flipping, I can say a few words about that. It wasn't as easy as it's shown on TV, that's for sure. And it's probably not the the ideal strategy for a beginner, to be honest,
100%.
But little did I know, and once I got into my second property, by then I was like, yeah, no, I'm not doing another flip. Well, and I ended up essentially in a buy and hold scenario for a number of years, and managing and dealing with tenants. So there are issues with every strategy. There are pros and cons, and we're going to be touching on some of those. And I know you yourself, you're very experienced both as an investor yourself and also in guiding others in their investing journey. So with that said, I'm going to bring up the few slides that I prepared, and of course I would appreciate your comments, if you, okay, I'm going to just start the slideshow. Are you able to see my screen, Tahani?
Yes, this is perfect.
Okay, wonderful. Okay, so right off the top, why are we even talking about real estate investing? Andrew Carnegie, the great steel magnate and philanthropist at the turn of the 19th, 20th century, said that 90% of all millionaires become so through owning real estate. More money has been made in real estate than in all industrial investments combined. The wise young man or wage earner of today, and again, we can easily say the wise young woman of today, invests his money in real estate. Again, that was at the turn of last century. So, from everything I've been able to gather, Tahani, real estate investing has traditionally been one of the fastest and surest ways to grow your net worth and amass wealth. Do you have anything to add to that?
Yes, of course. And why people love it and why I'm a big advocate of real estate is because it is so physical. It is something that you can go to, you can, touch. And not only you can go touch and visit, but you can also enhance. Where with stocks and bonds and all of that stuff, you cannot improve or enhance or, make it sort of like, make it worth more than what it is. With real estate, you can paint, you can change a few things, and then all of a sudden it's worth a whole lot more. And a third thing I'm going to add is that with real estate, that no matter who you are, we all need a place to live in. So it's a necessity. It's almost like, just like food and just like air, we need a place to really live, whether you're a tenant or whether you're a home owner. We all need a place to live and call home.
It's one of the essentials of life, right? Especially when we're talking about residential real estate, and we're gonna get into the types of real estate.
Correct.
So again, and this may seem like a lot, and I don't want people to get overwhelmed. We're gonna talk about some of the strategies involved with real estate investing. And by the way, when we talk about investing, of course, we're not just referring to the act of owning your principal residence and living there. It's great if you own a property, and that could be your launch pad to get into the world of real estate investing. We're going to be touching upon a number of the strategies that you see on the screen. And we could start with, and again, I would love Tahani to share, first of all, she's of course going to share some of her own experience with some of the strategies, including the experiences of her clients, but also we're wondering, what's working right now, because we all know we are going through some changing times right now, and maybe some things that worked in the past are not ideal anymore. Mm-hmm. So I'd love to hear what Tahani thinks about that.
So first of all, before we keep going, Leticia, I wanted to say that it's very important to understand why real estate investing is very good for anyone, and I'm going to say also women in particular, is because of many benefits. And one of them, especially with what we just experienced, is that with passive cash flow. If you have the right properties that will produce for you income while you're sleeping, while you're not, working at your job, and that is a huge benefit. Yes, we've heard that there are some tenants that did not pay their rent, but those are very few and rare. Not everybody. I know that for me, for all of my investments, and almost 85 or maybe even 89% of my clients, they've all been paid even while the COVID-19 was happening. So there is that, passive income, so that while we're not working, our money is working for us. Another thing too is that you have control over your investments, where if you are going out and giving a banker your money, When they take it, they're going to give it to someone else who will give it to someone else so that they can invest it in stocks and bonds, where you don't even know what are their credentials, and you're hoping and you're praying that it will do well. With here, you have more control, so there is also that benefit. You can, like, go in, you can talk to your tenants, you can maybe reason with them. So there's a lot more control with real estate. And another thing too is that what we're going to talk about, there is the passive income, but there is the appreciation, which means that you can make money three ways in real estate. The first one is the reoccurring passive income or cash flow. The second thing is your mortgage pay down, because every time or every month you're paying, your interest and your principal. The principal, it's going down, so there is more equity in the property.
Yeah.
And the third one is really appreciation. It just keeps on going up and up houses, even with all the predictions in the world right now that maybe they're going to go, lower, or maybe it's going to go, we're going to have a recession, whatever it is, it's still, people are going to need housing. People are going to need a place to rent, and real estate will always still continue to be a solid investment no matter what.
Yeah, and I do have a slide that talks about that in just a few slides over. But I wanted people to know that, because flipping tends to be the one strategy that everybody has heard about, because they've seen a show on HGTV, as I had a number of years ago when I first got my feet wet with any kind of real estate. So the whole idea with flipping is that, you find a property that needs some work, you perform renovations, and then you sell the improved property and you make a profit. And then you go and do that again. Now, again, it sounds like a great idea. And if you know what you're doing, there is the potential for good profits, and it's a good source of active income. Active income is what could be used to replace your existing work, okay? As opposed to passive income. And maybe we can get into that in a little bit. But essentially, and the reason it's considered active is because it does require, and again, we can talk about some of the cons of flipping, as I found out myself, is that it is quite time consuming. So unless you're going to hire a general contractor that you trust, who's going to manage the whole project for you, if you're going to be the one managing the renovations and you have to choose all the different things that go into that renovation, it can be very time consuming. And it literally, I found that it was, during the time that I was involved with three renovations that I was actually involved with, it took over a lot of my time, and again, what are some of the others? So time intensive, potentially capital intensive as well, because number one, you have to come up with the down payment to buy the property. You have to qualify for the mortgage in most cases, and then you need money for the renovations as well, right? Now, as Tahani of course knows, there are ways that you could get maybe private money to do the renos, but if this is your first time doing it, you're going to be hard pressed to find somebody that's going to lend you money when this is your first time. Oh, I'm gonna, you know what I'm saying, Tahani, right?
So Letitia, what we wanted to say about flipping is that if you're a newbie investor, and or if you have your first and even second property, I'd highly recommend that you leave this until you get to learn a whole lot more before you go into flipping, because there's already so much to learn as a newbie investors at the beginning. So flipping is just going to be way too overwhelming. As I always tell my clients, you need to crawl before you walk, and you need to walk before you run. And that's how this is, so because there is so much at the beginning, from understanding the area, building your team, doing all of these things. Better like not to get into this right away. I want people to also realize what we see on TV is not what the real life flipping is really all about. In fact, a few years ago, I was offered my own TV show, and I actually refused it. I refused it because they wanted me to say things that are absolutely not true in real life. And they wanted to say that it is only done for this certain amount, yet they have all these people that are working on it, and they have all these decorators and everything to make it look so attainable and so,
Yeah.
easy, but they're selling the dream. That's what I want real estate
Yeah.
investors to know, is that they're selling the dream. Can it be done? Of course you can do it, but you need a whole lot more than even time, because it
Yeah.
needs
You
time.
need a team. You need the
You need
trades. You
a
need
team, knowledge, and you
professionals.
also need money, because
Yeah.
banks, even if you're going to go and get a mortgage, from a bank's point of view, they don't like to lend on flips because they see it as a risky strategy. So it's most likely, if you're going to be doing it, it's going to be harder to get money from even a big lender, maybe like a private
Yeah.
investor. Is going to
Yeah.
cost you more, and it's going to
Yeah.
require more money and more knowledge. So I just want everyone watching, even though this is a sexy strategy, is just to leave it until maybe later on, until you know more about or educate yourself a bit further.
Yeah, no, thank you for those words of wisdom, Tahani. Again, in my case, I learned the hard way. I was dealing with a contractor that had been referred to me by my realtor at the time. Unfortunately, I did a lot of things wrong. I didn't get a written agreement with, a written contract with the contractor, which is something that I later learned it's essential to have, among other things. The other thing is it's very easy to, under those circumstances, you're going to be quoted one price and then the price kept going up. The price and the time frame kept expanding. Okay.
Yes.
Talk about,
And
maybe that should be another topic. Real estate mistakes.
that is a huge topic. That's how do you handle
Sure,
contractors,
contractors.
is a huge
Yeah.
topic, and it's an important topic, I should say, because there are so many people that are taken advantage of, and contractors who are maybe not insured or who are
Oh my
insured,
goodness.
they quote you very little at the beginning, then they end up telling you there's this thing that's going to
Yeah.
happen, and then that
Yeah.
thing, and then this thing, and then all of a sudden your profit
Yeah.
is gone without
Yeah.
you realizing. And
Yeah.
then in some cases, unfortunately, even a negative profit for some
Yeah.
investors. So it's very important that you don't get into this unless you have way more experience and more knowledge, and maybe even learn from someone who has done it, or or maybe partner, which we will talk more about partnerships later on, with someone who has done it. I
Yeah.
wanted to also say something else, and that goes the same for development, even though it's not a strategy that we have on in this.
Yeah.
A lot of investors, especially those that have done, like, say, maybe few flips, all of a sudden they want to become a real estate developer. Again, it's a totally different game, it's a totally different strategy, and it also requires different things from the investors than even flipping does. So that's why all of these strategies you have to assess as an investor, of which one is the best for you to start with, and then just kind of build on it.
Yeah, and one last thing I want to say about flipping it again, and you already touched on that in terms of problems dealing with the contractors, but I've also seen cases where somebody in the middle of a flip ends up overspending for the renovation, maybe putting high luxury touches that were not necessary because the market in that area is not going to support that price point, and they're not going to be able to recoup those costs in the sale of the property. So that's where you want to be working with, to the extent that you're going to be getting not just into flipping, but any of the strategies that we'll be discussing. You want to work with realtors that specialize in that area, and you want to know your markets. And then I'm sure Tahani can speak about that.
I wanna share with all the listeners here about one very, very important thing when it comes to flipping, and that is understanding and knowing what is your aftermarket value. Your aftermarket value. Because what happens is, before you go in, you have to understand what other houses in the area sold for, especially those that are updated, and what's the maximum amount you can get for a property, and then work your way down. So that's very important. So you have to work with a very knowledgeable realtor that can do a CMA for you, or comparative market analysis of, this is an ugly duckling, and if you spend 25 or 50 or 100, whatever the amount is, what can you at the end really realistically sell it for. Realistically, I say sell it for, and you have to continue being in talk with this realtor, because if you estimate that this is going to take you 6 weeks and it end up taking you 6 months, maybe what the realtor, maybe what the realtor gave you, or that market aftermarket value in the first 6 weeks, maybe it's not what you can get maybe after 6 months, because now you went from, like, say, a hot market to now a cooler market. So it's very important that you have someone by your side that can help you with this if you decide to go with this strategy.
Yeah, and final tip that I learned, and again, in my case, partly the hard way, is that you're going to want to be, if you're going to be doing this as your strategy, you ideally want to be doing it through a corporation, because it's considered active income. It's fully taxed by the CRA. And again, I'm not an accountant, but I have heard this from accountants that work with real estate investors, because many investors have gotten burned thinking that they're going to qualify for capital gains treatment, when in fact, the whole profit ends up being fully taxed as income, as if it was your job. So that's why you want to be doing it through a corporation, because then you're paying the preferred tax rate, which last I checked was about 12.5%. I understand it's gone to about 9% now. I don't know if you know anything, Tahani, but
again, this is another whole discussion.
Sure.
That I can be talking about the pros and the cons of either, if you do it under your personal name versus a company. But for now,
but flipping in particular, I'm not talking about other types of investments. I'm just talking about the flipping, because it's considered active income.
So the best, I would say that the best maybe advice I can give you is that really build a very strong team around you. Someone who, an accountant that understands real estate investing and and what's the best options for you. A realtor, or what I call a savvy investor agent realtor, that agent that can actually help you with the process, and who understands the market, and who understands what are some of the the things that you can do to enhance the property without having to go and spend tons of money on it. And also, a mortgage broker, and, the whole team.
Yeah. So thanks, Tahani. So moving on, this is a strategy. Now, I learned from you today something very important. So as people drive by in the city, they may see these signs that say, "We buy houses, any condition, we pay cash." Okay. And this is a strategy that, I've learned about, and I know there are people doing it. What Tahani just explained to me is that technically in Canada, in order to do this legally, you have to be a licensed realtor. And maybe explain to me, Tahani, why that is.
Yeah. So wholesaling, and I'm talking about, when you say there are signs where it says "we buy cash," that's fine. If you are the investor and you're buying cash, then that's fine. But if I am the one that's putting this ad out, and I am taking, and then you raise your hand, you say, "You know what, I want to sell my house." And then I take you, and then I show it to, say, Joe Smith on the other side, and I say, "Letitia, if you and Joe make this deal come together, I want $5,000 to $20,000. That's called illegal, and that's called bird dogging, and that's called trading in real estate without a license, because you're really acting like a realtor, but without a license. And you have to be very, very careful. I know there are people that are doing it, but they haven't been caught. In Canada, it's called bird dogging. It's illegal, and please be very, very careful. Now, if you are going out and trying to, get a property so that you and maybe your joint venture buying it, then that's legal.
In other words, but the concept of it, in case people do come across it, the concept of the strategy is that you look for motivated sellers, people that are desperate to sell their property. Maybe they are in the months before their house is being repossessed because they're behind on their mortgage payments. And so they're desperate to sell, and then you approach them and you say, "Hey, listen, I'm going to enter into an agreement with you to buy your property, and you want to negotiate the price that's below market value." And then you then find an investor. This is one of those strategies that doesn't require money from your pocket. But again, keep in mind what Tahani said. But if you are in
bird dogging, this is really trading in real estate. Please be careful. Know the laws. talk to a lawyer. I know this is huge in the US, but in
Yeah.
Canada, it has its own consequences. So I would highly recommend that you speak to your lawyer before you decide to do something
Yeah.
like this.
Yeah. And again, but conceptually, the whole idea is that you then find someone like a flipper that has the capital to then take this property, make it pretty, and sell it and make a larger amount of profit. And essentially, they pay you a finder's fee. And again, perhaps this is something that works in your area. It works here as well, but remember, you need to be a licensed realtor. You can't just do this as a layperson, or you could potentially be facing some consequences, legal consequences. Okay. Okay, let's talk about, okay, this is something that is allowed in Canada. And now it's a niche strategy, but it could potentially, so tax sales. So there are homeowners out there that fall behind on their property taxes. And there comes a point where the municipality says, well, my dear, we're gonna take over this property, you know, because you owe us taxes, we're gonna take over the property. So essentially it's also called a tax lien. And then they go and sell this property at auction. So another person out there, you or me, could go to one of these auctions and potentially obtain these properties at far below market value, because the city is really only interested in recouping the tax amount. Now, realistically, it's never going to be as low as what, because there's an auction. Yeah, Tahani, do you have something to add on that?
Yes, and that's very, very, I mean, I don't know if
it sounds simple, right? But
so I just want your listeners to know, not only I'm a real estate investor, but I've been a realtor for over 25 years, and I have my own brokerage as well. And I have taught, I had a certification course teaching realtors as well from all across Canada on how to work with real estate investors. And this is what we call tax lien, or sometimes we call power of sale, which is a bank sale. That's when defaults on their mortgage payments, and then the bank has to sell the property. So there is an assumption that you're going to get those houses for way less than what they're worth. Yeah. And the reality is, it's not true in most cases. And the reason why, it's because the bank must try every effort they can to sell the property for what we call market value. Yeah. And then if it doesn't sell, like let's say that market value for this property is 500,000, then they can lower it to maybe for 75, then they can lower it to 450, but they have to show that they've tried to get what they could for that property. So not always it's a really good deal. And also what I want people to understand, that with power of sales, there is a law that most real estate investors don't know, is that an owner can go back and claim that property even until the end of just before closing. So even though you as an investor think that you've bought this property and you bought it from you got it from 500 to 450, and then now you're ready to close, and then all of a sudden this owner will come and say, okay, I've got my own money to the bank and now I'm ready to take it over. So this could happen. How often does this happen? Not very often, but I just want investors and buyers to understand that when they're buying tax sales or sales or power of sales, that this is a possibility that not many people understand or know about.
Yeah, I mean, again, and the tax sales in particular are a pretty niche strategy, and I've heard of people getting burned when they go to auction. First of all, one of the opportunity, at least theoretically, because I'm aware of that, the rule at Tahani when it comes to power of sale properties, that the bank has to try to sell the property as close as possible to market value. When it comes to tax sales, I sincerely don't know how it works, whether the city also has to make the effort to sell. At the end of the day, it goes to the highest bidder. When it goes to auction, it goes to the highest bidder. And you better believe that, there are people out there that are really shopping for these deals, which would push the price up.
Yes.
But I have heard number one, my understanding is when you go to auction, you need to show that you have the money to close on the deal. You need to show. So in other words, yeah, you may think, oh, it's a very low price strategy, when in fact you have to show that you have money to close. You not just, that's my understanding, not everybody can just go to an auction off the street and say, start bidding if you don't actually have the cash. And then again, there are people that will bid on a property and find out that it's not as advertised, or they misinterpreted what was actually being offered. So you want to get some coaching in this area. In addition to what Tahani has mentioned, there is a gentleman, Naftaj. He's a longtime investor. He has a website called Flipping for Profit with a number 4. He is one of the few teachers I know in Canada that works on this strategy. So if you have more curiosity, you're welcome to get in touch, okay? He didn't pay me to say that, and Tahani knows, but it's just because it's such a unique niche. And
Yeah.
Exactly. Now let's talk about this, Tahani. This is probably the biggest, one of the biggest strategies out there, which is buy and hold. The idea that you buy a property, you rent it out, and you hold it for the long run.
Yes.
And as I learned, as opposed to flipping where you're always on a treadmill, okay, you're always buying, selling, with buy and hold, you actually make money 4 different ways. So what I understood when I attended another seminar a number of years ago was that when you flip the property, you are only cashing in on the forced appreciation that you forced through renovation. So really, you're only profiting from that property in one way. But when you buy and hold the property, you have multiple ways in which you are profiting from that property. Number one, you've got the cash flow. You don't want to buy a property where what your tenants are paying you doesn't even pay your bills and doesn't pay the mortgage. That's not a good deal, okay? That's where you need somebody like Tahani to help you evaluate that property to make sure you're not getting into a cash flow negative situation, because maybe for one property you might be able to support $100 negative per month, but even that is, if that's going to be your strategy, you can't do that for too many properties, right? So number one, you get cash flow. Number two, in Canada, and correct me if I'm wrong, Tahani, but I think we're talking about in terms of like historic appreciation in real estate values, it's about 4.7%, somewhere around 5% passive appreciation. And that's obviously, that's the average across Canada. And we know that certain markets, such as here in Southern Ontario, we're seeing much, much higher appreciation, at least in recent years, due to immigration, market factors. We can talk more on that. The other way you make money is, again, you have the option, if the property needed some work, you can force some appreciation. In other words, force the property value to go up by performing renovations. And then last way you make money is through what did you call it, Tahani? Principal recaptures, I heard the word, but equity back in your pocket. What did you call that?
Appreciation.
Not just appreciation, but as your tenants pay you
mortgage pay down. Mortgage
pay down. Exactly. So remember, a portion of what your tenants pay is going to go to cover the interest on the mortgage, but the portion that goes to pay, there's a portion that goes back to the principal, and that's equity back in your pocket. So in time, with buy and hold, the potential is, so, did I not? Oh yeah, so the pros are that this is probably one of the biggest ways you can build long-term wealth, okay? But the cons are that initially you're not gonna see a lot of cash flow unless you're in a market. There are some markets out there, and Tahani, maybe you can speak to that, where the property price is so low, but the rents are still high, in which case the net cash flow can still be quite high. And then again, now you've become a landlord, so you're going to have to deal with tenant and property management issues unless you choose to outsource that, let's say to a property management company. And again, the only other con I can think of is that you do have to come up with the down payment and qualify for the mortgage, unless you're fortunate enough to find some sort of advantageous situation. And I don't want to get into things like VTBs, Tahani. Yeah.
So with buy and hold, it's really one of the most basic strategy, and it is one that almost everybody can do. It's simple. That's where everybody should start. And that's where, if you just do nothing, absolutely nothing, but buy a property and then hold it for a long time, it will go up in price and will appreciate while you are paying your mortgage down. So this is like the simplest, easiest. And if you only own 2 houses in Canada plus your property, you're truly considered one of the wealthiest in Canada. So even if you don't want, especially for professionals, I've helped thousands of real estate investors, and especially professionals, they just don't have the time to go and do flips and do all of those, other sexy strategies. So for them, they act into the buy and hold. So this is a great method to start and just, buy and hold. Maybe if we have more time later on, Letitia, we can talk about the difference between buying a house versus buying a condo later on, and maybe the benefits. But this is a great strategy that is simple. There is still a lot to learn by how do you find an area, how do you build a team in an area, and also how do you find properties that will appreciate much faster. I actually want to give a story.
Yeah,
I had a guy by the name of Mike, and Mike now is actually a friend, because before I didn't know him, but before he heard that this area is really great and he ended up buying in this area, he came in and he bought a property, and he bought this property based on two things. First of all, that, oh, it's a great area, and then two is that the price was very affordable for him. So he's like, oh, I can get a property for, this little, I'm going to buy this property, not knowing there is a lot more than just only these two factors when buying properties. Fast forward a few years later, he calls me and he says, oh my gosh, Tahani, this property is just not going anywhere, is not appreciating, the tenants are not paying the money. And he was actually in a negative, so for me, when I looked at Mike, the only thing that he did not really do is that he did not understand the area and the pockets that are within that area, and how certain pockets in one area will do better than another area, and why maybe you need to be in an area where it's closer to amenities, it's closer to school. You have to understand the type of tenants that you are getting into. It's, in fact, I have all of this information packaged in my Ignite program of exactly what you need as foundational 101 real estate investing. So, and that would make a huge difference in your real estate investing career, or path or journey, because you could end up being like Mike, where you're not making any money, or you could end up making a lot of money. Like just recently, another investor bought a property, and in this property he paid only 5% down and fixed it up a little bit. I know he's a real estate investor, but he was also a first home buyer, because investors only have to put 20%, but he was also a first home buyer.
yeah.
He bought it a year later, and he already made about $130,000 on that, first investment. Yeah, so it really, like, there is a huge difference between getting
So what do you credit such an extraordinary
area, the right
okay.
pocket, the right area, the right type of property, what type of property, the type of renovations that will increase in value. That, like, it's all of it. It's all of it. It's not just only one little thing that will make a huge difference, and the difference between doing really well or just, maybe going into negative.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you for sharing all that. So as a variation on the buy and hold strategy, we have something that people refer to as BRRR, buy, renovate, rent, refinance. So this is another, it's sometimes referred to as flip to yourself. So instead of, as we explained earlier, what a flipper does is they force appreciation, they renovate a property, and then they go and sell it. And in that way, they cash in on that forced appreciation. Well, what if you could have your cake and eat it too? I like that expression. So in this case, what we're dealing with is a property. You find a property that needs some work. You still have to have a team in place, trusted people that can perform the renovation for you, or hire a general contractor that can do a proper job for you. You renovate the property, and then you rent it at market rents. And then now you have what's called the after repair value of the property. And based on the new assessed value, or not assessed, but rather appraised value of the company, of the property, you can then do what's called a refinancing. You still need to leave typically 20% down. Sometimes lenders will ask you to leave more depending on what your overall financial picture is. You need to still leave some equity in the property, but you'll be able to ideally pull out the excess equity. And again, you ideally may be able to use that to finance your next purchase. And this is one of the strategies that I've seen personally, you know, having met people that are active investors. This is one of the strategies that seems to be a preferred strategy to accelerate your wealth and your purchasing power. Anything to add to that, Tahani?
Yes, this is absolutely this, and another one that we're going to get into, which is, you know,
in a couple of minutes.
They're my favorite strategies, and they are amazing in today's market right now. I want you to know the difference between this one here and a flip is that flippers are usually contractors, professional contractors that are able to go in and do most of the work themselves and, you know, save on money in case if they, you know, in case if, you know, they don't end up making money at the end, where this here is a bit safer. Another thing too is that I prefer this for any newbie or newbie investors, even those that have 2 or 3 properties, because it's like it's used as an exit strategy. So for example, you're trying to buy, renovate, and sell, but if that does not work, what's another plan that you can do, which is this? You can buy and you can renovate and rent it and refinance it. Take that money and then use it for another property. I love using this strategy. And when I do this, I add the next strategy, which is adding a second suite in the basement.
And we can talk about that. So again, the only the costs of the strategy are very similar to the buy and hold strategy. I mean, to the extent that you're going to be dealing with tenants, you know, potentially tenant management, property management, but you're not going to have a lot of property management because you've just finished renovating it. So your property is muy bonita, very beautiful now. And hopefully because your property has been renovated, you're also going to be attracting, ideally, you know, of course, tenant screening, that's something else Tahani can guide you through. Okay. But you're going to be attracting usually a higher caliber of tenants when you have a nicer unit, as opposed to buying a property that is in bad condition with outdated units that nobody wants to live in, and people are gonna, you know, then your tenant profile is not gonna be so shiny usually. So so you know, this is
get excited when they see a place that's been taken care of by the owner. Then they in turn want to take care of it, you know. And that's why, you know, when you have something like this and you give it to a tenant, then they're like, there is that excitement, it's like, oh my gosh, you know, and they end up paying more for it. They ended up like having almost like pride of renting this amazing looking place. So there was a lot of benefits to doing that, for sure.
So as we were just touching on that, a variation of the BRRRR strategy involves, it's specifically focused on the addition of a secondary suite, usually in the basement, but I've seen some experienced investors do more creative things where they split the house in 2 and they very interesting stuff. There's the few experienced investors that will do that. For most people, this would just involve turning the basement into a legal basement suite. And again, this is something that you want to do properly, right, Tahani? People think, oh, I'm just gonna. And again, when I did this a number of years ago, the one property that became my buy and hold, I actually put in a basement suite. At the time, I was told by my realtor, oh, you know, 70% of Mississauga basements are illegal, so don't worry about getting any permits. Yeah, you don't want to do that, because who knows that there are literally safety issues, you know, and I don't want to even think about.
Yes.
You know, you wanna work with a contractor, you know, unless you know what you're doing and you're gonna go and pull permits and all that. Ideally, you want to work with a contractor that is very familiar with the process of legalizing a basement and what's involved with it, right?
Yes. And each city has different, you know, guidelines. So it's very important also to know what are the guidelines within your city. And it's very easy to find that out, because you can just go on the website and then you can download or maybe call them. Just call them and then ask, you know, what are some of the requirements in order for me to, you know, add a second suite. Like, for example, you have to have 2 parking spots, you know, side by side, not back, like, you know, one after another. It has to be side by side. The size of the window in the basement has to be a certain size. The height of the basement has to be a certain height. There's few guidelines that you have to get yourself familiar with, but this is a definite one of my favorite, by far one of my favorite strategies that I love, you know, doing. If I don't do the developments, I'm usually doing this type of, you know, renovations. Yes.
And I was going to ask you, Tahani, what's been your experience in terms of the turnaround time? Well, right now we're going through, you know, the COVID times and everything, but normally if somebody does go, and I don't know if this also depends on the municipality, it probably does. If it's a smaller town, maybe moves faster. But yeah, from the time you apply for the permit to the time they grant you the permit, and then you got to start the rental. Like what kind of time frame are we talking about in
So
terms of?
if you're talking with, people that know what they're doing, and it depends on the city and the requirements, it goes from about 3 to 6 months. So
Okay.
3 is really amazing and fast, and you're done with and all of that, and then to 6 months. And if you're going to be doing this, like I do it, we can prepare for it even before we take keys and we get the house. So there is steps that you can even start doing even before you close on the deal. So
Got it. And then, I mean, presumably, if this is a rental property, you could go ahead and rent the upstairs unit. I mean, in my case, that's what I ended up doing. Now, unfortunately, I then started the basement renovations. The upstairs tenants were not happy to have, dust coming through the AC and all the noise in the basement. So how do you usually deal with that? Because I think that's a very practical consideration. And like, if as an investor, you took possession of this property right now, you don't want to be in a situation where for 3 to 6 months, you've got no income coming in while you're busy putting in that secondary suite. So what solution do you find for that?
Yes. So the first one is that you have to also think of this cost. We call it carrying cost,
Carrying
as
costs,
you
yes.
are really having this property. So if you don't want to have the tenant upstairs, then really it's going to be costing you your mortgage payments, your taxes, your heat, your hydro. You're paying for all of that while you're doing the work. So you must allocate and you must think of this carrying cost as an expense while you are doing these renovations. And if you do end up renting the upstairs, then you have to make sure that you constantly say to the tenants that this is work in order. This is this is what we're doing. It will be noisy. And then you will have that somewhere in the contract that, they are aware of this. And then
Okay.
that we should, and also give yourself more time. So even if you think it's going to be done in 3 months, even say that it will be 4 or 5 months. But honestly, really, it sometimes depends on the tenant and on the property. But I personally prefer to have both of them empty. I finish it, then I clean all the ducts, and then I put in the tenant in there.
Makes sense. Yeah, because otherwise you have to do it afterwards anyway. Have the
And
duct
safety issues. I don't like to be working on something and then a tenant maybe falls, or contractors going in and out. So you have to also think of insurance and all of this. So for me, that's my preference. For others, they still like to do, sometimes they go, oh no, I can't. I have to have somebody helping me, pay
carry
for
the
mortgage
cost.
loan.
Yeah. Got it. Well, no, thanks for sharing all that, Tahani. So now we spoke, and again, we're covering a number of different strategies, guys. You may hear about them. Not every strategy is going to be applicable to everyone. Rent to own is another strategy that's out there in the marketplace. And how rent to own works is that, we all know there are people that would love to be homeowners, but maybe they've gone through some sort of bad personal situation. Their credit has been, temporarily destroyed, then they would not be able to qualify for a mortgage at this point in time themselves. However, give them 2-3 years, that would be, they would then be in a good position to qualify for a mortgage. So as opposed to them continuing to rent as they have been doing so far, they have the option. There are people out there that will offer these tenants what's called a rent to own scenario. And how that works is that either you yourself as an investor, you would buy a property in your name, you qualify for the mortgage, and then instead of you being a buy and hold investor for the long run, you could put in a tenant buyer and say, listen, I enter into an agreement with you. I'm going to sell you this house at a prearranged price after 3 years. Okay, you enter into this rent to own agreement. And how it works is that these people, the tenant buyers, have to give you a deposit, an initial deposit, usually 3 to 5% upfront, just to show that they're committed, that they're not going to be fly-by-night people. And then in addition to that, over the next 2-3 years, they're going to pay you on top of market rents. They're going to pay you a certain amount of deposit, which is going to count towards their eventual deposit down payment when they go and actually qualify for the mortgage. And then come around year 3, by then they usually would have accumulated 10% down. Okay. Then they go to a mortgage broker, they get a mortgage in place. You sign a letter saying, I've received 10% down payment from these people. That's my understanding of how the whole process works. Now, again, it can be a little technical. Well, a little, it can be mucho technical. So this is an area where, yes, you could choose to do it yourself, but I think it's a lot of work for a definitely for a first-time investor, because, you have to find and pre-screen the tenant buyer, and then you also have to either, make sure you qualify for a property yourself or find an investor that qualifies for the property. So there are companies out there and investors that specialize in this niche. And what their job is, they find you the tenant buyers, they screen them, they make sure that these people within the next 2-3 years will be able to qualify for the mortgage, and they make sure to keep these people in touch with a professional mortgage broker that specializes in credit repair. Okay, so that by year 2 or 3, they're in a position to qualify. Now, the benefits of this strategy, as you can see here, is that right off the bat, you're going to be getting higher cash flow versus, let's say, a typical buy and hold scenario, because these tenants are not just paying the market rent. Remember, they're also paying you money towards the deposit of buying this property from you. So you're getting it for somebody that's looking for high cash flow. This could be a good strategy. Some of the other pros are that these people are now more invested. So you're not going to be dealing with stupid tenant issues like, oh, the toilet doesn't work, or I needed to come and change my light bulbs. You're not going to be dealing with that, because these tenants, they see this as their property. And in fact, in the rental agreement, right there, you can say that a minimal, like small repairs, you take care of them. If it's something past a certain amount, I will take care of it. So the cons are that, well, we already explained the benefits of the buy and hold strategy, how long-term it can lead to a lot of wealth. In a rent-to-own scenario, after 3 years, 2-3 years, you sell off this property to somebody else. So now you no longer own it. So especially in times where we've been in an appreciating marketplace, you really have to wonder whether that high cash flow, whether it's worth the trade-off of not having, forfeiting that long-term appreciation that you would otherwise have had if you had kept that property in the first place, right? If you're going to get involved in this strategy, again, I would highly recommend that you do it by working with somebody who is specialized in this field. I will have future people on my future calls that will go more in depth into the strategy and some of the advantages of it, which I've already covered some of. Anything to add to that, Tahani?
Yes. This is a strategy I personally don't even use, or I've never even tried, and I personally don't want to even try, because I feel like it's very, again, just like all the other strategies, is very specialized, like flipping.
Yeah.
You've got all those contractors that do the flipping, or the builders. So this is more, again, specialized. And I know a friend who I actually had her as a guest on my second season, and she does nothing but lease to own, and her name is Rachel Oliver.
Yes,
she's amazing, and she's
Yeah.
very well known. If you want to interview somebody, she would be somebody I would definitely recommend.
I have her in mind.
Yeah. So if you want this strategy, there is the again, there is the cons and the pros of each strategy, and this is more advanced. And yes, Rachel can help you and can set you up.
Sure.
You have to remember what are the requirements. And for me personally, I think it's just way too much work for less money, I should say, where I can do a lot better somewhere else. But that's to each its own. And that's why, as a real estate investor, you have to make a best choice for you, and which one is best for you.
Totally, Tahani. Now, again, student rentals, rooming houses, micro suites. Well, you know what? Again, this is a strategy that, at least in the past, used to give very high cash flows, because you've got the number. It still does. Yeah. Yes. My concern right now is what's going to happen with, all the universities that are going online. Is there going to be, the same demand in the marketplace for student rentals? But for sure, this traditionally has been a high cash flow strategy. So for somebody who's looking to replace their existing job or existing work and generate high cash flows, a student rental, could be the way. And I have a friend, and I put rooming houses there because I have a friend, an investor friend, who that's been his strategy of choice. And again, it's an extremely high cash flow strategy. Now, the cons obviously are it's management intensive. Not everybody has the wherewithal to deal with rooming house tenants, and the amount of, and there are other issues with that. Was that many?
Yes.
Oh, the maintenance, so wear and tear. So again, now in the areas, there are certain cities, and Tahani, you probably know this better, but there were some cities that were considered, university towns, and there was at least a portion of the city that was like very focused on student rentals. And in those areas, there are companies that will do student rental management, of course, for a fee. There's solutions to every problems. Definitely, rooming houses is not something I would have the stomach for, but some people do. Again, my friend happens to be very hands-on. He's very handy. He is just not afraid of anything, and he likes those high cash flows. Now, we know that even in terms of lenders, you end up limiting yourself when it comes to, when you get into some of these scenarios. Now, what I've heard, Tahani, and I don't know if you can comment on that, but especially in light of perhaps students not coming back to school in the fall, some of these investors are now converting their spaces to what we call micro suites. So like little bachelor suites, so it's a kind of similar strategy, but now they could appeal to potentially seniors housing. Again,
so if I may say so, Leticia, you've done a great job explaining it. Yes, a lot of investors, this appealed to them because it had a higher cash flow than, let's say, a buy and hold. If you compare this to this, it had a higher cash flow, but it also required a whole lot of, hands-on management, because there's students coming in and out on even per semester sometimes, every 4 months, and then sometimes, every year. So it really depends on the area. And in my area, the Waterloo region, we have 2 universities and 1 college. So a lot of the investors that invested in student houses have been actually, they're feeling the pain more than others. Let's put it this way right now. And yes, you could, turn it into rooming, but at this point, it's still not a good strategy to use, because it's similar. It's just that instead of having young kids, now you're having, older sorts of kids, so it's not just really working. And to turn it into what we call micro, apartments, is still a bit harder, because you had 1 kitchen with many students and 1, floor, and maybe 1 or 2 bathrooms, and now, turning those into mini, it requires more time, more money, and more renovations. So this is a strategy that we are actually still trying to navigate and understand as we move forward with the whole change right now that we're going through. But this is another strategy that I've never was interested in, and I never wanted to, get into. In fact, I didn't even want to sell student house to any of my investors. And if any of my investors came to me and they said, Tahani, I want to buy a student home, I usually would refer it to another realtor in this area that I know that does nothing but specializes in student housing.
That's crazy. Okay, good. No, I hear you, Tahani, and I tend to agree with you. I personally, as much as I liked the higher cash flow potential, I just the thought of the higher level of management, I knew I didn't have the stomach for it. And then it's not for everybody, but again, there are ways to outsource the management and so on. There are ways to do it, and some people are okay with those trade-offs. Like, they're okay with the higher management as long as they get the higher cash flow. But now, again, we're in very uncertain waters, especially because of this whole move towards everything's going online. Are we going to have a need for student housing?
A lot of houses that are vacant right now. A lot of houses are vacant right now. So vacancy rate, those were probably the most that were hit.
For sure.
But family, where you have families, it was a bit easier.
Fair enough. That's very interesting. Again, another area where we're seeing a lot of changes. This was a very
Yeah.
profitable strategy for a lot of people. Can
Yeah.
people guess? Put it in the comment section if you can guess where this picture is from. What city did I pick that from? I'm curious if you guys would guess. But I like that beautiful sunny condo. Well, anyway, Airbnb in certain markets used to be a very high cash flow strategy. Again, the trade-off is, you know, management intensity. Now, of course, there are companies that will manage short-term rentals for you, take usually a 20% off the top. Um, so you know, if you don't want to deal with guests that come in every other day or every few days and have to, you know, deal with that yourself, you could potentially outsource it. Right now, again, we're in very uncertain times because travel has been limited so much. So even in a city like Toronto, Airbnb, people are making crazy money. And as you can see, one of the strategies with short-term rentals is that somebody would enter into a long-term rental agreement, uh, you know, with, let's say, a condo owner, and then turn around and turn that into a short-term rental. Now, if you do that, then the original owner knows. I suppose that's okay. There's no issue with that. But the problem is people were doing this illegally, right, Tahani? There was a scandal. I don't know if you heard, that, you know, where
On TV, of course.
oh, there was a big scandal. There were
News.
condo owners who thought they were going to get a nice family staying there. You know, that these are my new tenants. Well, it turns out that their new tenant was in fact, you know, somebody seeking to make profits on Airbnb and renting their unit to, you know, a ton of other people. So you got to watch out that you don't fall prey for something like that. But if you are an investor interested in this sort of strategy, short-term rentals, that's one of the areas that we know that a lot of municipalities were trying to impose upon or pass bylaws against. So there was always the risk of that happening.
Yes. Yes. So the laws is very important for especially newbie investors to understand that each strategy goes with some laws and regulations, and it's very important to understand all of those. For Airbnb, you know, like for example, some people downtown Toronto in condominiums, you know, they would want to use this, but it's forbidden. So be very careful that you don't end up buying a property and then this is the intention of you doing this, and then all of a sudden you can do it, because it's not allowed. So it's very important. Now, again, Airbnb, it's very lucrative when it comes to cash flow. And it's something that I did not, you know, I did not use, and I did not get into it. And the reason why, it's almost like having your own small business. And it required a lot of management. Yes, you can hire a property manager, but it will also cost you more money, just because it's almost like a hotel. Every time somebody goes in, and it could be sometimes as long as one night, when they leave, you have to change all the sheets, you have to do everything, sanitize, do all of that, you know, and then do it again and again and again. And at this point, even as hot as downtown was for this strategy,
not so
right
much anymore.
now, I know property management companies that specialize, you know, in this strategy and help Airbnb investors. But right now, they're sitting on so many properties with no one, you know, showing up, and they're thinking, okay, now what do I want to do? Almost like student housing, you know, now what do I do now with this that's happening? When is it gonna open? I also, like, I have even a friend who's probably one of the second biggest hotel owner in all of Canada. They're also having a hard time. So if hotels are having a hard time, this is having a hard time, because there's no one going in and out of Canada. And another thing too,
a lot less.
In the US, this is even still doing good, because in the US, Americans tend to move from one state to another, or vacation, you know, from one state to another a lot more often than Canadians do.
Really?
We Canadians, we tend to kind of stay still. Like if we're from Ontario,
I was pretty shocked. I have to say that I've met, you know, I've been living here for 24 years, Tahani, sorry for interrupting, but I remember just, you know, having lived here for only a few years, and my family and I, we went to Quebec, we went to Montreal, visited, but I met people that were born and raised in Toronto who never had gone to Montreal, Quebec. So I think what you're saying is true. For some reason, people, they like, you know, I don't want to generalize, but I just remember being shocked about that. So it's interesting that you know that statistically that's the case.
Of course. Yes,
That's so
of course.
interesting.
So
So
this is what you need to know is that short-term rentals, again, are very, you have to be very aware of the laws and the regulations, and especially with furnishing, and, you know, having to change and sanitize and,
even
all
more
of
so
that
than
stuff.
ever. Yeah.
Yeah, so even though I just want listeners to know that even though everything seems to be like, oh, this is amazing, because most people tell you about the good in everything, I want you also to ask about the not so good in those strategies. So not just only the pros, but also the cons, so that you can make a better decision when you are deciding on the strategy that you want and which one is best for you at this point or at this time.
Well, that's part of what we're endeavoring to show on this, beginner level webinar, that there are pros and cons that come with every strategy, and you need to go into things with your eyes open.
Yes.
So we just have three more strategies to cover, Tahani. I don't want to keep you for much longer. Yeah, the last thing I want to say is I've heard, because 2-3 weeks ago I had one of our realtor friends on the call, kind of giving me a Toronto area market update, and he was telling me that some of the short-term rentals are now being converted to long-term rentals, but because now there is, I don't want to say a glut, because that probably by Toronto standards, we had such a low vacancy rate to begin with, but now essentially there's more inventory on the market in terms of long-term rentals, because property owners have had no choice but to convert some of the short-term rentals to long-term rentals. As a result, rents have apparently dropped down by about 15%, which again should be good news to Toronto renters, especially markets like Toronto. I'm sure other cities are experiencing similar phenomenon, like a similar situation. But what I'm surprised about, though, and again, I know you don't work necessarily right downtown Toronto, but the surprising thing is, even though some of these condos, so some condo owners are choosing to just try to sell the units. They don't want to even keep them as a long-term rental. Maybe that was never their plan to have a long-term rental, what have you. But surprisingly, the condo market is still pretty hot. Like I would think now that's like, well, there's all this new inventory. Not so much. I mean, I'm hearing stories of multiple offers, on condos even.
Yes, there are, but what I wanted people to know is that there is way more inventory than ever before, where before, and I'll tell you how I know is because, yes, I have friends that are, in that market, but I also, both of my kids actually live downtown Toronto, but they rent downtown Toronto and they invest in the Waterloo region. So this is very important, and part of their cash flow pays for rent in downtown Toronto because the prices are so much higher. And right now they're still considering buying, and for the first time, looking at maybe options that are less than 1 million. And right now there's few options that are less than 1 million, where before there was almost none that were less than 1 million. So the market is
We're
changing.
talking about single family homes in the Toronto
And I'm talking about, single, not condos.
Condos you can still get for like less than that, guys.
Yeah. We can do a whole session about why single versus condo, but that's not for now. But the thing is that I wanted to tell the listeners is that there is more options for you to choose from right now. And yes, there is multifamily. Just don't get caught in that craziness.
Multiple offers, sorry.
Multiple offer situations. Don't get caught in that craziness, because there will be, like, you'll still end up being able to get something. Yes. And again, we can do an update on the markets and why that's happening, but later. Let's continue with this.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have a couple more slides. So again, one of the other strategies out there is actually, instead of you going out there buying a single family home, you could look at buying an apartment building. And I know that may seem like, what, you're telling me I could buy an apartment building, but there are actually, some of the advantages, first of all, right off the bat, usually higher cash flow. We're talking, instead of a couple $100, potentially a couple $1,000 coming your way. So that could be right off the bat, life-changing income for somebody. In addition to that, when you perform, let's say, the BRRRR strategy on an apartment building, because of how the value of the buildings is calculated, which is a function of the income that comes in, as opposed to simply market forces. So if we look at a single family home, usually the property value is based on the surrounding area, market factors, and so on. When it comes to apartment buildings, to some extent, the market can play a role, yes, but the biggest piece is how much income is this building bringing in. So the building value is determined as a function of the income that comes in. So if you, in doing renovations, you're able to increase the rents, bring in better tenants, or reduce expenses and in effect affect that income, you could see literally an exponential jump in the building value. So the potential for wealth building through a multifamily strategy is perhaps higher than most. Okay. The cons, well, why don't we, I know, Tahani, you actually have experience with this strategy, and why don't you tell us a little bit about, give us your thoughts on this strategy.
I love this strategy, and I am right now really trying hard to even start building low-rise apartment buildings. The reason why, because they are in such huge demand. So there's so much demand, but there is not enough products out there for multifamily. And I want to stress out that multifamily is anything that's 6 units and up. Anything that's 5 units and lower is still considered residential. So that's what I want also the listeners to understand, that 6, 7, 8, and then up, that's commercial. 5, 4, 3, 2, that's considered residential. So commercial is very much so in high demand. It's very little out there. That's one of maybe the disadvantages, is that you're going to be waiting for a while in order for you, to get something. And the other right now, I just want the listeners to understand, is that most apartment buildings, the rents are still low, and the sellers are asking way high, because the sellers are thinking, oh, now you can get maybe $1,000 for this 2-bedroom, but they're only getting like maybe 600 or 700.
Yeah, you cannot sell based on.
So they're selling it, on the potential that you can increase it,
and
but
you
the
don't want
reality,
to buy based on that, because we live, especially here in Ontario and a number of Canadian provinces, we live in very tenant-friendly provinces. So you cannot just, if a tenant is there paying below market rent because of rent control, and their rent, and even worse, as I'm sure you've come across, Tahani, some landlords, some property owners never bother to even raise the rents at all. As a landlord, as an investor, you have every right to, even in even in provinces where we have rent control, you have every right to raise the rent by the allowable percentage. Okay, the landlord tenant board in Ontario says, okay, 2.2% for 2020. Well, make sure you do that, because if 10 years have passed and you haven't done even those minimum rent increases, your building value is now going to be severely affected. And if you think you're going to sell it based on the potential value, maybe a foreign investor with very deep pockets, who's got nothing better to do with their money, is willing to put money into that. But most investors want to buy based on the actual numbers, and that's the smart way to buy, right, Tahani?
Yes. And may I say something also, that with residential, the bank looks at you and your income, like, oh, you know what, you make that much, and you can only afford that much, and this is how they really determine your ability to pay back that mortgage. With commercial, they do look at you, but they look more at the property and the income. So really, it's not like you don't have to get you pre-approved, because they're looking more at what the property is making and how much it can actually carry itself. So that's why there's a huge difference, and that's a huge distinct, that you need to understand as a real estate investor. So for those that don't have, or they maybe, I would say, hit what we call a credit wall, and they can get more properties, because after 3 or 4 properties, then your income might not be able to get you more. That's when you can look at multifamily, because then you know what, the lender is really looking at the property and what it's making versus on you and what you're making. Very important distinction.
And Tahani, I know you're not a mortgage broker yourself, but I was wondering if we are going to have a mortgage broker lady on the phone, but not everybody knows about commercial financing, and that's obviously some mortgage brokers specialize in the commercial aspect of things. But I do understand that there are some net worth requirements. If correct me if I'm wrong.
100%. Yes.
Yeah, so it's not, I've always, I was very enthusiastic learning that, wow, I don't have to qualify based on my own income or my own resources. The building can qualify, but the reality is that unfortunately, there are some net worth requirements. So if the lenders don't deem you to be a strong enough candidate to kind of handle this sort of deal, then you're going to have to look into creative financing. But there are
or a higher down payment.
Or a higher down payment. Exactly.
So this is also great for those that have money and like they can actually
business owners, for example, people who don't declare a lot of income necessarily, but their net income may be low, but maybe they have assets.
Correct. That is correct. Yes. Yes.
So anyway, we could do a whole session on
apartment building. I have a mastermind group that in that mastermind group we talk in depth, like a whole day on just only apartment buildings, just only some of these strategies, because really we are doing, we're just kind of giving
scratching the surface,
big picture. Yes.
Exactly, for sure.
What you're looking for and what you to expect.
For sure. And let me see if I have anything on there. Yeah, well, so I have a slide on other types of commercial assets. So as you pointed out, Tahani, once you get past usually 5 residential units, you're now in the realm of commercial real estate. So even though, multi-unit residential or apartment buildings, people can relate to them somewhat because you're still dealing with residential tenants, but the reality is they're considered a commercial asset, and you're going to be looking at commercial financing in most cases. I understand there are some lenders I don't know if it's still the case, but I remember hearing that RBC was willing to finance even up to 8 units as a residential, but they're one of the few lenders that will do that. And the only advantage to doing that is, usually the requirement is only 20% down as opposed to commercial where you usually need a higher down payment, 25, 35%, depending on the deal. So again, in the realm of commercial properties, we have other classes of assets: retail, industrial, office. What can I say? I'm sure you have a lot to say.
I have a lot to say about this because after COVID-19 and what just happened or what we've gone through right now, retail and office are hit
very much,
so bad and so hard, so bad and so hard. And even offices that are even downtown, and I'm talking about big banks, because my daughter and her husband, they work in big bank, with big banks.
Mm-hmm.
They're also right now trying to move away from having this high-rise beautiful building to having people work from home. So what everyone needs to understand is that if you are thinking about buying commercial plazas because of retail, please rethink it, or rethink maybe other ways of dealing with your vacancies when one becomes vacant and because an owner is not able to carry on. And it's so sad. It's so sad seeing so many businesses go out of business. It's just so heartbreaking,
Of course, I know.
But it's the reality, and you have to really understand that. But having said that, I want you to also realize that industrial is going very, very, very hot. Industrial is becoming one of those one of maybe best commercial, investing right now, because first of all, the entry, to get an industrial maybe building is much cheaper than getting a plaza. It's much cheaper than getting an office building. And now it's also the rent is much cheaper. For example, you could be paying $25 per square foot for an office, and if you do industrial, it's only maybe $5 a square foot. So there's a huge difference. But this is again a strategy for more advanced real estate investors, and industrial is definitely one of my favorite as well.
Amazing.
And so, but I just want people to understand that right now, retail and office, you have to be very, very careful of what you're getting yourself into, and understand what you're getting yourself into.
So Tahani, that's good to know that you have experience in this area as well. If for people who are interested in going in depth into commercial real estate, I did find an amazing teacher. He is based out of the US. I've attended some of his courses in person, Scott Shield. His website is commercialacademy.com. I hope you don't mind, Tahani, that I give him a shout out. And again, he's not going to be in a position to help you the way Tahani would be, because if you're looking to actually make moves here in Ontario and have hands-on coaching, this is where Tahani can be of service. However, if you want to literally be educated exclusively in this commercial area, this is a gentleman that this is all he does. And I'm actually very curious to find out, what's going to happen to all these assets, like the retail properties, the office. Do you see any of that being repositioned, Tahani, in any way right now?
It's so sad. It's like, there's so many. I'm just trying to see if I can get for you like the list of now retailers that are closing. And I mean,
You know
it's
what?
getting longer and longer and longer. And at this point, there's talks of maybe again converting those into apartment buildings,
Yeah,
because there's always somebody that needs a place.
to live. Yeah.
But it's still a little bit early, and a lot of the owners are right now, trying to figure out creatively what is the best solution for such things, but
I can see an
yeah.
office. I can see an office being converted to that, but like to try to convert a mall to, that's gonna be a lot harder.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we don't know what's going to happen. We don't
Oh,
know if there's going to be a combination of like retail and residential. That's what they're trying to think right now, because they need both.
of course. Yeah. It's well, and I mean, one of the things I also learned, I mean, there will always be certain businesses, like service-based businesses, that are likely to remain open. So hairstylists, more so than others. But even yeah, I mean, you're not going to replace all the retailers that are closing their
No,
doors.
but most of those people are right now even working from home. And then being a builder also, what I've been seeing a lot more of in our area is that, what they do is that they build on the main floor, more of like a store type of style. And
Yeah.
then the people would live upstairs. There's a lot of those in Toronto as
Yes.
well.
Yes.
And
Yes.
there's
Yes.
more and more of those being built because, like I said, the
People don't
reality.
want to travel. They just want to go downstairs and get all their needs met.
Yes, yes, but
I
it
hear.
also gives you almost like an area of the house that feels like it's an office. And then if clients come in, they go into that section versus
I
going
see.
into your home.
I
So
see. I
this is
see. Yeah.
really, yeah, it's funny because just today I went to see one in my area just today, and it's just absolutely beautiful.
So a lifestyle community almost, like, but it's really
Not community. It's still private. It's still your own. But like you've got your like say hairdressing maybe shop, and upstairs you live upstairs with your family. It's just
okay.
it's your own house, but you've got the
Oh,
commercial and the
oh, I
residential
see. I see. I
part of
see.
it. Yes.
Interesting.
A
Interesting.
mortgage broker downstairs and you live upstairs. A real estate office downstairs and you live
Okay.
upstairs.
So
Things
we're
like
talking
that.
about mixed use properties, mixed use. Okay, I see what you mean. Yeah. Okay. Okay, guys. So this is like the second last slide. So again, all the strategies that we've discussed up until now have been what we would call, they do require your involvement to some extent. They are what we would call active real estate investing strategies. Even buy and hold, you still have to go out there, go shopping, do a lot of work. There are ways for people who are just very busy, they don't see themselves doing any of that. There are ways you could start real estate investing in more passive ways. So for example, you could become a private lender. I'm going to have next week another amazing lady from my network, Susan. She's going to talk about the idea of private lending. So how you could get started in real estate in a very passive way. So you literally can become the lender for somebody who is doing flips, or who needs money for a down payment, or you could become the mortgage holder for somebody. So that's a passive real estate investing strategy. The other way is again, REITs are another passive investment strategy. We're going to have somebody in the future come and talk about that. The other way is if you are not confident enough to do a deal on your own, or you have the option of actually partnering with an experienced investor. So Tahani just shared with me that she is beginning to work in a joint venture manner, and there are a number of experienced investors out there using the various strategies that we discussed. And again, on future calls, I'm going to have some of them on to talk about how, one of the ways you could get involved if you don't want all the hassles and the potential headache of maybe dealing with tenants or dealing with property management issues, any of that. You have the option of being the passive investor partner on a deal, and then you're going to have somebody who's the active partner, who's an experienced investor, who has no problem dealing with all the headaches and doing the active part of the work, so that you can just come and just collect a paycheck, not a paycheck, but rather cash flow in this case, and benefit from the property without having to do all that work. So did I put that pretty well, Tahani?
Yeah, yes, you did. And I wanted to say, I mean, going the private lending route, and I've done that with my RSP money, and or investing in REITs, which I've never done, is okay, because you end up making like an 8%
Yeah.
or a 10% or whatever. So it's okay for
Probably better than what your mutual funds are doing for you right now.
better than or what the bank can give you, 100% better,
Exactly.
But I always say, if you can find an expert like myself and you do the joint venture partnership, then why not make it 50% rather than make it 8% or a 10%?
You can make
But
a lot more.
I know that Letitia said that it is you don't have to do as much work here, but the reality is you have to do a lot of work finding the right partner and understanding what you're investing your money in, because it's not just like handing your money just to someone and then, just hoping and praying it will do well.
No, absolutely. So due diligence upfront, and just make sure that make sure you work with professionals and investors with a verifiable track record. You don't want to somebody just met off the street who doesn't have one deal to their name is coming and asking you for $200,000. Yeah, that's maybe not the best place to be. So with that said, Tahani, any closing words? I know we covered a lot of ground, and we went a little longer than I thought.
Longer than I thought too.
Sorry, my lady.
Yeah, I mean, let's hope that what we've done here is that giving you a great idea of an overall different strategies, and for you to understand a little bit of what works for you, what does not. And if you're a newbie investor, buy and hold is still amazing. Don't just think that I need to jump into the other strategies. Not yet. So again, crawl before you walk and walk before you run. And for all the ladies,
tell us a little bit about, so tell us, first of all, Tahani, I know you're particularly passionate about empowering women, but you work with both men and women, but
I do.
Tell us a little bit about some of the programs that you offer, because as a very experienced realtor, investor, and coach, you're now in a position to give back to the community and actually handhold people through some of this stuff, right?
Yes. So 2 years ago, I've actually made a big decision, and the decision is really to niche myself and work with women more than ever before. And the reason why, and even though I just want people to know that 87% of my clients are men, and men come to me like, Tahani, how do I make more money with real estate? And then I realized, like, where are the women, and why the women don't think that they can do what the men can? Not that I don't want to support my men clients, but I also want to encourage more women to get into this, because it is really a great strategy. The stats are crazy. When I found out that the average age of a widow in Canada right now is only 56, and then at 56 finding yourself not knowing how do I take care of my money, and you end up giving it to a banker and hoping that it will grow for you when you're 85 or 80, whatever the age. So this became a passion of mine, that I want to empower and help women understand money and how to deal with it and how to grow it, and real estate is definitely one way of doing that. And I've created a community, and honestly it became a movement. You've been part of the
I attended a couple of Tahani's FIRE conferences, and they were absolutely amazing. Literally at the last one you must have had 1,000 women, Tahani, at least.
It's females in real estate, and short acronym for that, we call it FIRE. So it's really the FIRE movement. And for the ladies that want to join, I have the Females in Real Estate Facebook group. Just go there, look for it, join. It's for free. You get to ask questions. You get to learn more. I do videos there. I share as much as I could on that website. And if you are ready to really do something, because economically we are going into one of the best times to get into real estate investing. I cannot even stress enough of how this time going into the next year or year and a half is going to be amazing for real estate investors. If you want to really take action and you're ready for it, you can go to Tahani.ca and find out some of the options that we can work together. And yeah, and for the newbie investors, there is also a program called Ignite. So if you go there, just hit on it, and then you'll find out more information. We're not gonna, go into details about that. But the one thing I want to leave everybody with is that don't ever feel intimidated to ask questions. Ask questions so that you don't also feel so like, make a mistake and then say, I should have said that, or I should have asked that, or I should have done that. So it's very important, no matter who, even lawyers. I have a friend of mine who's one of the biggest lawyers in Canada, and he says to me, hardly anybody approaches me and asks me questions. You need to ask questions. Don't feel like just because they're a lawyer, you can't really ask them questions. So that's one of the best advice I can give anybody that's listening to this Facebook.
Thank you. And once again, Tahani, and I feel very lucky that way, because since I started this webinar series called Money Matters, and part of my intention was also to empower people around their finances in the various aspects of them. We're probably going to have some more advanced webinars for people who are business owners and so on. But for the time being, I've chosen to keep it really for a general audience, because I want everybody to know that there are things they can do to move themselves forward financially wherever they may be. And I'm very blessed to have people like yourself in my life, in my network, that I can introduce to my group of friends on Facebook, on YouTube, wherever they may find this webinar, on LinkedIn. And yeah, and again, I feel very blessed, because with every one of you guys that comes on, I get smarter too. So thanks again so much, Tahani, for your time. Thanks everyone for watching. I'm gonna minimize now I'm gonna stop sharing the screen, and let's see if there were any questions on Facebook before I let you go, Tahani, if you don't mind.
Yes.
Okay, let's see, Facebook. Oh, somebody's asking, what about co-op housing? Okay, that's a whole different, that's the one thing we didn't talk about. I don't know if you have anything to say on that, Tahani. Co-op housing? That's, yeah. Yeah, are you still there, Tahani?
Yes, probably she's talking about maybe co-living, or maybe co-investing. I don't know, because there are two different things. So co-living is when you and a bunch of people together a house, and you own it as a share, ownership. And
no, but there are those housing co-ops. I think more likely the person is asking about housing co-ops.
No, those are government assistant kind of, projects. Again, I know some investors that specialize in that, but I'm not, again, I don't do that. And,
yeah, very niche area. Yeah, I don't even know. Again, like, I mean, there are other, and I want to say, like, even though we covered a lot of strategies, there are some strategies out there that we didn't touch upon. 100%. I mean, we didn't get into development. We didn't get into seniors housing. We didn't get into partitioning.
Vacation homes, cottages, and all of that stuff. So
I mean, those could be in the Airbnb short-term rental area, but I mean, they are a niche strategy, and there are so many other things. We didn't talk about trailer parks. I mean, we could be here for hours and hours. So really, this was supposed to be a 101, real estate investing 101, and I think we did cover a lot of ground. So thanks again so much, Tahani. Have a wonderful rest of your week.
Yeah,
thanks,
and if anybody has any more questions, they can reach out, info@tahani.ca, info@tahani.ca.
That's right. Thanks, Tahani, and thanks everybody. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.